When my mom was 4 years old, her family moved to Iran. Her older sister Anne was 10 years old, her older brother Paul was 7, and her youngest brother James was 2.5. Why did you move to Iran?
Well, my dad had just finished medical school and he was in his late 30s, and he and my mom had always wanted to do some service work. My grandpa was a Presbyterian minister and they were interested in doing medical missionary work and working as volunteers overseas in a Presbyterian hospital. And so he was assigned to go to Iran. And so my whole family moved from the West Coast to New York, and we lived in Stony Point, New York, and prepared to go overseas for 6 months. And they put us up in housing with a lot of other people who were going to do the same thing. And we got a lot of shots, and we got ready to go. Then, after 6 months, we moved to the capital, which was Tehran, and we lived there 6 months in an apartment. And again, my dad went through a lot of training, and my mom was, they were doing a lot of language stuff and learning Farsi. And then we moved to Tabriz for our permanent location, which is in the northwest corner of Iran. We got to live in a big old house that was formerly housing for nurses. And so, because we were a family of 6, we got that. And we had a kitchen upstairs and downstairs and had various people living with us at various times because it was such a big place. It was pretty cool.
What do you remember about living there?
Well, I remember a lot of things. One thing is we didn't have a car. We really didn't have any money because we were volunteers and my parents had not had money before that. And so we received a stipend for living, but we've had a pretty cool life. We got to borrow a car sometimes from the hospital, and it was this kind of turquoise green Jeep, and we called it the Inshallah, which meant if God was willing, we were going to, which means if God was willing, we would make it there because it was always breaking down. And we went on these big trips out into the countryside and to visit places, but we also went camping for a whole month with another family, the Priors, to Turkey and went camping on the Black Sea. Everything had to be super cheap because we didn't have any money. But that was part of what I remember. I remember, like, well, of course, Ferkunde, who lived in our house, she didn't live in our house. She worked at our house and she lived a ways away, and we would visit her house sometimes. And she was an amazing woman who helped at our house and helped cook and helped just us to live a more organized life there and how to acclimate to Iran. She spoke Turkish as her first language and Farsi, and she was wonderful. And she knew how to make apple pie and peanut butter because she'd worked for other Westerners before us. And she was really an incredible part of my recollection. I remember our house because we had this huge walled fence around us, and it was sort of both a protection but also kind of a wall gate to the outside world. So sometimes that was kind of strange, but also kind of exciting because we had this huge play area and a lot of the other kids would come over, and we used the crates that we used to move over to use as hideaway forts and build a tree house and other things like that. I remember going to the bazaar where you'd go downtown in Tabriz, and the smells of the bazaar are really incredible. Every time I smell anything that smells like the herb sumac or certain kinds of smells, I'll just see the bazaar in my mind. Lots of copperware hanging down, beautiful art, beautiful silverware, meaning silver, in different shapes and forms. And the food was so yummy. We'd eat fruit leather made of apricot and pomegranate, a lot of lamb, a lot of homemade yogurt sold on the street in little containers, with wax paper and a rubber band on the top, fresh yogurt, and just yummy bread, the lavash, the bread in the bakery down the street, hot out of the oven, as big as half my body, really, these big squares of bread, and we'd be sent down to get it.
Did you go to school?
I actually started school in Iran because I was pretty young, but my mom, initially they said there would be no school there, and my mom said she would not go if they didn't have a school. She had 4 kids, and she had been a former school teacher. So they formed a one-room school at the consulate because we lived across the street from the American consulate, and the Presbyterian hospital grounds were on the consulate grounds. So the consulate actually donated a room in their building to us, and their kids went there, and Meg and Tommy Green, and we went there, and some other friends from DC went there, and kids from Denmark, from England, and there were a few of us grades K through 5. And it was very cool to be able to have this one room schoolhouse and meet kids from other places, and interact very internationally, at least with people from Europe. We did puppet shows. We went on field trips. Our first teacher was from Georgia. She lived with us when her roof caved in because she had mud straw construction, as we all did, and big storms. Sometimes your roof would cave in. So it was a pretty cool experience. And I went kindergarten and first grade there.
Was adjusting back to life in the US hard?
I think it was harder on some parts of my family than others. It was hard for my sister because she was in seventh grade when we came back. She had to get braces, and kids really kind of teased her as something different. We all were very different people when we came back, even though I was little. We were very changed by it. Everything in our house reminded us of Iran and was part of Iran. Our food tastes, our interest in politics. Even as a young kid, I just had this new interest in anything international. We all wanted to try foods from all over the world all the time, and it really colored all of our later experiences. We talked about it all the time because it was such an important reference point. And so for my sister, she couldn't share that as much with her friends. Versus me, I could have my mom come into my fourth grade classroom and give a slideshow, and people thought it was really cool, and it was exciting. And so it was a change for all of us, though. And my parents were very changed by it. They changed their politics a lot. My dad was pretty conservative in his youth, and going to Iran and medically treating people who had been literally tortured by the Savak, which was the secret police under the Shah, and who had been trained by the CIA, really switched his perspective on politics. And my parents came home and were very politically active on many things. And I have to say that while the American government was very surprised by the Iranian Revolution in 1979, nobody in my family was. We saw it coming.